different browser.
Yeah, I get no slides available.
So Carsten has been granted slides, but also has no slides available. Well, it's officially time, so welcome everybody. Once we have some slides, we will hopefully be able to do something with that. Worst case, I can present them from as a screen share.
So I reconnected. Can you try giving me the slides again?
Yeah, seems.
No, he's in the queue and he's.
Yeah. All right. So I can do this if we have to. Welcome everyone to the SEDATE session at IETF. This is the second meeting of the conference and maybe the first meeting for some people. I have a list of things to tell you about here, which are also in the slides. If you're in the room and you have not yet logged in to Meet Echo, please either use the QR code that's up there on the screen or log in through the data tracker. There's a link which I think I've got a page tells you about. The note well, hopefully everyone has seen this already. As we used to say, note it well. There's lots of stuff here that controls how we behave and tells us what to do and what we need to say along the way. If you have any questions, please ask. All right, here's the little tips thing in the Meet Echo, in the data tracker information for this session. There's a little online link for the minimum tool. Otherwise, you can log in with full Meet Echo. Either way, you can then add yourself to the queue if you want to speak. I think in a session this size, we don't need to stand too much on ceremony, but please do log in once through there at least so that you show up in the blue sheets. There's a bunch of resources, which I think, again, most of us know how to find this. If you go to the data tracker, the agenda is right there in one of the menus. So just data tracker, IETF.org, everything can be followed from there. And finally, here's the resources for this session, including the notes area. If anyone would like to pop in there and take notes, that would be very helpful. I'll probably pop in there and do some things as well as we go. And the mailing list, all the information's in data tracker. And this is what we have for the agenda. Introduction, the liaison. Mark, are you in this session as well? I can't. Yes, excellent. Yeah, if you can pop in as well and speak to the liaison, and then we'll get into the draft. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, the liaison shouldn't even take me 2 minutes. The situation is that the IEB did make a selection. They did communicate that selection to ISO. ISO has a very formal process for vetting and voting on its liaisons, and that process ends next week. And so on the mailing list, I expect to have an announcement about the ISO liaison sometime in the middle of next week. And unless there are questions, that's all I meant to say.
Cool. Any questions from anybody? Excellent. All right. So, Carsten, one option is for me to just bring up the your slides on my screen here, and you can ask me to.
Can we try the deck sharing once more?
Sorry?
Can you give me the slides once more? I just reconnected.
Yeah, I'll give it a go.
If you go to settings
Yeah, that works. Okay. So I think I have the next 50 minutes on the agenda, and I will try to go through. Wow, there's a big echo here.
Is anybody else? I don't think anyone else is sending sound.
No, I think it's the room that is actually echoing, which shouldn't happen if that is properly set up. Okay,
Yeah,
let's see how much I can tune that out.
I can't disable that, so we might have to ask Medeko.
Now, if you disable the room audio, it will be very quiet for you.
I mean, can't you, is the mic on here? Yeah, but I need to.
It's supposed to be.
Okay, yeah, true.
Yeah, you could disable the presenter mic. I don't know if that is part of the
Yeah,
problem,
I'll have a go.
because I don't think we will have a presenter.
All right, so I'll switch this off.
And now I can hear myself quite as well. Okay, let me just try to ignore that. Let's see how good I get at that. So I wanted to say a few things about the status of the current document, then maybe spend a couple of minutes confirming the recent directions we have taken in the draft, then focus on the 4 issues that actually need work. And if we actually have time, we might want to look at an editorial issue, but I think we will be way out of time by that in any case. So right now, I think there are 9 issues open on GitHub. I didn't check this in the last hour, but it was that way when I prepared these slides. 2 of these issues are just in there for a potential next round, but they are out of scope for the current document, which are floating times and future times in the sense of calendar planning. One is marked philosophical, which means, oh wow, the feedback is gone. Thank you. Which means that it's good to have agreement on what we are trying to achieve here, but there will be no direct text changes. So if you have an opinion on the issue brought up in number 5 and what it could mean for the current draft, please comment there. Then we have one issue that is already solved, but maybe we need to look at this quickly. Number 2, the editorial one, and the 4 that need work. So the draft version -03 was submitted at the Internet Draft Deadline, and I think the main new item was the simplification we had agreed at the last meeting, to no longer try to structure the registrations of extensions into namespaces. So you can now register extensions, but you cannot register namespaces. So any namespaces that might happen will happen due to convention and gentleman's agreement. So that was 03. And for 04, we took in one feature request, which is the support for offset time zones, which are not your garden variety time zones, where a politician makes rules on how local time differs from universal time, but it's set offset. And we have a syntax for that, which is provided by Java. And we are essentially just trying to support that part of the Java libraries by allowing an offset in the time zone part as well. And obviously, we need to spend a little bit more time actually defining what it means to have potentially two offsets in a timestamp. One, the RFC 3239 offset, which is really used to compute the UTC time from the local time, and this offset, which is, well, could be saying the same thing, could be saying a different thing. They don't compete with each other, but the intent of saying the time zone inside and outside the brackets is different. And while we were doing that, we got discussion about the meaning of named IANA time zones. And I just went ahead and wrote up what I think the working group so far had been discussing. But you really have to read that text and tell the editors what we need to fix there. So let me go through these. So in the commit given there, the text now says that the rules defined for a named IANA time zone can change over time, which of course means that the time zone hint given in a extended timestamp could change over time, the meaning of the time zone hint. And what we say here is that the use of a named IANA time zone implies that the intent is for the rules to be used that are current at the time of interpretation. So it's kind of a statement in the future. If the politicians change what Europe Paris time actually is, this is really what we are trying to say here. And of course, the intent may then be in conflict with what the actual offset in the 3339 timestamp says. So we have to have some conflict handling, but we have to have some conflict handling in any case, because it is possible to create extended times that are internally inconsistent. So at least we are now alerted to that fact and can, for instance, trigger some user interface mechanism or protocol mechanism to clarify what that timestamp, extended timestamp, is actually supposed to mean. Okay.
Did you want people to speak to this, or?
If people have an opinion on this, this would be a good time to state it.
Cool. Ujwal, you're up.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Great. Just a clarification. My understanding is that in case of mismatch between whatever offset corresponds to the IANA time zone at the moment versus the offset that is included in the timestamp, and without any mechanism to say which one to choose, the default behavior would be to trust the offset that is within the timestamp. Is that correct?
Well, right now it doesn't say. So we would have to write text that actually provides the intended handling of this situation. And from the existing discussion, I'm taking away that this is really highly application dependent. So in the end, you essentially will have to ask the application what the supposed outcome is going to be.
Right. I mean, yeah, I was thinking more about the case of the application which doesn't have the ability to say prompt a user to choose between. Speaking about the case of temporal, since it is a programming API, we can easily allow the programmer to write code in a way that would allow them to choose either behavior. But yeah, so this is something, this is really interesting. Thank you, Carson, because this is something that came up many times within the temporals discussions regarding this also. What I stated was my understanding of the current draft. I wanted the draft to at least my intention was that the offset that is included in the timestamp is the one that is used to resolve the the instant, and the time zone annotation is an additional bit of information that could be used for many things, but also could then be safely ignored if not needed. But yeah, so my suggestion is that as long as we have agreement within this group that trusting the offset when the in case of conflicts, when there's no way to ask for more clarification, be the default behavior. I think we already have support for this, and if so, then we could just proceed and add more text to make that more explicit.
So when you say trusting the offset, you mean trusting the RFC 339 offset?
Yes.
So this would create the effect in that RFC 3339 implementations could easily support the format that we're specifying by just ignoring everything after the current format.
Right. Michael?
All right, we have more people in the queue. Mike, you're next. You should be able to just turn on your audio.
Yep.
All right,
Hear me
go
now?
ahead.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry. Yeah, I have a hard time accepting that. I mean, the offset tells you what you believe the offset to be at the time the timestamp was created, and what you're finding with this notation is that at the point it's used, that offset is no longer correct. So what you're saying is you should actually use an incorrect offset.
No, that's not what it says.
Well, no, I think that's what you're saying is
So
if you
I think
if
what
you use the
Uqua
offset.
said was if you can't check, if you can't resolve the conflict, then you default to using the offset.
No, you said one very important word, which is use. Nobody forces you to use an inconsistent timestamp as if it were consistent. So there is an indication in that timestamp that there is a problem with interpreting it. But how you actually react to that, we haven't specified. And I would expect that this is exactly what applications want to decide based on their specific application.
Yeah, okay, all right. I mean, maybe it's just a matter of how this gets written down. I mean, the point is, I guess, at the point at which you use the timestamp, if you find that if you are capable of interpreting a time zone given by name, and if you determine that the actual offset specified in the timestamp is different from what it now is, it does at least alert you to the fact that there's a problem. In the calendaring world, there's a number of things you probably should do at that point, which is reschedule meetings and things. But what you actually do is, what you should do is reschedule, I guess. So yeah, okay. Maybe it's just a matter of how you see what you should do when you discover it. It's a good thing to have both in a sense because it allows you to discover that the world's changed since you wrote down that timestamp.
Yeah. All right. Neil.
Go on. Yep.
Hi. I just wanted, oh God, echo, to agree with Carsten's original point, which is that the what to do when there's, sorry, this echo is driving me mad.
Mike, can you turn
Can
your
someone
audio off,
mute
please?
whoever's?
I think I can kick you as well. There we go. Oh, now I just kick Neil because I clicked at the wrong time. Sorry, Neil, you'll have to turn yourself back on.
Yeah, you can also locally switch off the audio
Okay.
in the other direction. Then you don't hear us anymore, but at least you can say something.
Yes, that's a good idea. Okay. I just wanted to agree with Carsten that I'm still getting this. What to do if you get a conflict here has to be application specific, and which is slightly different to what Ujwal was saying, which is that if you can't ask the user, it should always default to trusting the offset. Yeah. So I don't think there's anything else.
All right. So what I'm hearing there is a proposal that the text say it be application specific, what the outcome is, rather than having a hard coded must be this way.
Yes, but I agree with the original text that's on the screen here that about the kind of intent, because otherwise, why would you have put a time zone at all? Just put the offset.
Ujwal?
Cool.
Do you hear me? Okay. Yeah. To respond to what Michael said, I think I disagree with the statement that if there is a conflict, then necessarily the offset is wrong. It could be either way. So let's say I schedule an international meeting, and somehow the offset and the TZ rules change, and now the offset is out of it doesn't work with my time zone anymore. That still means that the meeting needs to happen at the same instant in time, right? So this is one of those cases when I'd still want the meeting to be at the same time, irrespective at the same offset, irrespective of if the TZ rules changed. And then there's of course also cases where I would not want that. I would want to be woken up at 8 a.m. every morning, irrespective of what my local time zone is. So I think either could be useful depending on the application, as was mentioned. To respond to what Neil said, I agree. Like if the application can make a call, if the application has enough context to make a call, let's say, then it should be able to do that. I was specifying more about the case when let's say you have a daemon running on a server somewhere, which has no context about what does this what does this timestamp mean, and what do we do in that case, like when there's no way to get any further clarification, and there's no way to tell what the original intent was, or like what the overarching use case is.
Hi, this is Pete Resnick. And by the way, the mic is working. The audio in this room is a little strange. Anyway, I actually disagree with Ujwal and Karsten on this. If you know that you've scheduled a meeting that will always be at an offset plus 800, then why would you add a textual time zone after that? If that hint is providing nothing that is going to be useful if there's a conflict, then you should leave out that hint. If the meeting will be at plus 0800, then the meeting will be at plus 0800, and saying that it should be, in some Chinese time zone that might change is not useful. And it seems to me that the right thing to do is, if you're adding the hint that this is in a textual time zone, then your intention is that this is a moving target, and the offset is just what it was when I created the meeting. If that is not your intent, then there needs to be a way to explicitly mark that that's not the time zone you want. You're giving the hint for some other reason. But I'm trying to figure out what the use case is of, I want the interpretation to be at the 3339 offset, but still add this hint. I don't understand what that use case looks like.
So maybe we can give a quick answer here. So when I'm scheduling a meeting at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Saving Time, then I know that there are going to be people from all over the world there. And when the US changes their daylight saving time, which apparently is happening right now, we have a solution, a problem that doesn't have a predefined solution. And I think the important thing about the hint is that it tells us that we have a problem. And then we have to run some mechanism to reconcile the timestamp with reality.
But this is Pete again. So if you scheduled it in Pacific Daylight Time, as currently imagined, what is your intent? Is your intent to say that if that definition changes, the meeting has moved and you have to reinterpret, or is your intent that it is at the 3339 offset? If it's the latter, then why are you telling me Pacific Daylight Time? Because that's a meaningless piece of data.
Well, it's meaningful in the context of an application that actually shows appointments. Because if I have an appointment that is no longer sharply defined, because the people out in the world think it's in a different point in time than the people in California, then I have a problem. And acting as if I didn't have a problem is not useful. So
no, sorry, you're going to have to repeat that. I didn't understand. If your intent is that it will be at a particular offset, not related to the textual time zone name, why are you providing me with the textual time zone? What does that add?
If I'm an end user, not the person hand constructing this artifact over the wire, my intent is I'd like it to be in Pacific time at this time of day. And encoding both those bits of information in the data format allows that intent to be transferred to another system in a way that the other system can understand I meant Pacific time, not just minus 800.
Right.
In a way that it knows that I meant Pacific time there, and for the end user that matters. Sure, you could say over the wire you don't need to add the time zone name if your intent is just to say the exact timestamp, but the idea of this is to transfer that information between systems, including the user's intent. But the time that they might want to lock in might be the hard-coded time. There's no easy way in this format to say which one's more important, and I did make a proposal a while back, which we decided was too complex, to have a way to tag which one matters.
I'm still not understanding.
Yeah.
If the intent of the user is fixed minus 0800, that's what they intend. They want to see that on their personal system.
Doesn't have a clue what they intend.
Well, the person said, well, now that's a different question, right? If the user has no intent that the system can interpret, then the system has to have a default of what that means.
That's what we're trying to work out now.
That's right. And my feeling is closer to Michael's, that the general intent of the user, if they say Pacific time, they mean whatever Pacific time is going to be from now and into the future. Now, you may disagree with that. You may think that no, system-wise, we should design this such that if the user says Pacific time today and it moves to 0700, then to minus 0700, then we should move the meeting and ignore that it's labeled Pacific time. But if that is the system's default, the system need not add the Pacific time to the timestamp, because someone on the other end of the world doesn't care that it was labeled by the original user as Pacific time.
Yeah, but the user themselves, when they transfer between systems, does care. And this is a data interchange format that's not just for the use case you're imagining. It's also for the use case where you are storing your own information and coming back to it later, or where you're transferring it between systems. And having that annotation is of value to the user, even if it's not the primary intent.
If that is the reason it's being used, then it should have an explicit marker, one way or the other. I don't care which one. Decide what you want the default to be and make the other one have an explicit marker. Making it a guess is the worst possible choice.
Yes, Pete, I think that the difference here is that you are assuming that the system must automatically resolve any nonsense that politicians do. And I don't think that's possible. So it's really useful to have timestamps that say, hey, I'm inconsistent. We have planned something that no longer works in the real world. Please supply new information.
Ken, you are next in the queue.
Ken Murchison. So Pete pretty much said everything that I had come up here to say. The issue we have here is that we're extending 3339, so we can't strip off the numeric time zone. So this artifact that we're stuck with, even if all we really want is the IANA time zone. So I'm in agreement with Pete's suggestion that we actually have a marker where the user can suggest their intent or determine the intent. Or I haven't read 3339 recently, but perhaps we can steal something from 8536, which is if you use a negative, negative 0000 as the offset, which is considered nonsensical in 8536, that might be a marker that we could use to say, I'm here just as a placeholder. What I really want is the IANA time zone. Now, whether that causes a conflict with 3339, I have not researched that. Plus and minus 0 might be treated the exact same way, in which case my suggestion is useless, but something to look into.
All right, I think, Mike, you are next.
So I was just on the point of maybe. Let me just hang on. I think people are saying what I was going to say anyway. I just I think you should treat it as a flag to indicate that. I think that's what you said is that this is what I thought the offset was at the time that this is written down, but now it's not the same. The point I think really is that the local time is really what matters to people, and this does give you an indication that the calculation has changed since it was written down. We can't just say it's got to be at this given time, this given offset or this given UTC, because that means that your local time's moving around, and people may have other commitments which we can't figure out. So it really does come down to sort of having to reschedule things.
Okay, Ujwal, you are the final person in the queue. I think we should probably close it after this, and I'll try and summarize what I've heard.
Hello. One of the things that I wanted to sort of first to answer to Pete about why would we need the informative tag if all we care about for the resolution of the instant is the offset is because when a meeting is scheduled and you have a timestamp, you can, even if you follow what's mentioned in the timestamp, right? If you follow the offset, that doesn't mean that when doing things like arithmetic, you cannot take things like DST or time zone changes into account. Another issue that I wanted to raise with the behavior that was suggested, which was to trust the TZDB, is that I don't think there's a way to make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to TZDB, right? So if I say that we should trust the TZ rules, and my computer has a new version of the TZ rules which points to an updated offset, but my colleagues do not. Does that mean that they would be prompted to attend a meeting at the wrong time?
Yeah, I think we have had a good discussion here and have to take that to the list. Yeah, Pete is on the chat again using the word trust, which is not a meaningful concept here. So there is no trust. Somebody sits in front of their computer and tries to make something happen, and the world is unfortunately working against that, and we have to find a way to. Yeah, it's the intended offset, but other people have agreed to that, and they have agreed to that based on the old meaning of the time zone. And now you have a new meaning. So how true is that agreement still? And I think that's a problem that cannot be solved at the level of this timestamp. It's something that the application needs to solve.
If I could just summarize what I've heard, there was fairly strong indication from a lot of people that there needs to be an explicit decision somehow, either explicitly it's always the zone, explicitly it's always the offset, or something added to the format that says explicitly what the intent of the creator of this timestamp is. I don't know if there was a which of these are acceptable or unacceptable to people, but it has to be an explicit somehow. Not just a best guess. Does that seem like a fair summary? Pete's hopping up to the microphone again.
This is Pete Resnick. I think that's close. I think the important bottom line is that you've got to decide what the markers mean. So if you want there to be a case where I'm giving you something, but I'm not sure what it means, there needs to be a default interpretation. And I think that's the crux of the disagreement, is if the system wants to express, I've been given an offset, a numeric offset, and I've been given a textual time zone name, and I, the system, have not been able to assess the creator's intent, there must be an interpretation that is my default behavior that I am expressing. That there is no point at which systems do not know the correct intent and are picking two different outcomes. So there's got to be a default interpretation that's given and then explicit markers that say, I know the intent and this is what it is.
Yeah, but that could be solved either way, either by the draft saying it's always this or by having a marker.
That's right, and that's the clarification, is there's got to be a default interpretation for, I don't know, but everyone's going to assume that it's, and it sounds like the answer is, everybody's going to assume that it's the numeric offset. And then there's got to be an explicit marker which says, no, in this case, I don't want you to interpret that as the numeric offset. I want you to always, the intent of the user was, I want you to interpret the textual time zone name.
All right. Thanks, Pete. So the next step here is to take this to list to discuss, or to a GitHub issue and then the list, I guess, Carsten?
Yeah, I can just add to what Pete just said. The first choice is an RFC 339 timestamp. The second choice isn't. So the fact that we are trying to extend 339 here kind of binds our hands as to what the default choice can be, which is in many cases definitely simply the wrong choice. So calling it a default choice means you are hiding a problem. You know of a problem, but then you are not telling anyone by taking a default action that is not the desired one. So yeah, it would be nicer if we had a way to actually say, this particular one is an RST 339 timestamp, and that other one over there is not, and it's based on a time zone intent. But right now we are stuck in the first corner of the landscape. Okay. Yeah, the X-dash problem, I'm just bringing this up. I mean, the draft is clear what how our solution to the X-dash problem is. But I just wanted to point out, we have this leading underscore for experiments. I strongly believe there needs to be a way to do experiments. And the wording is very clear that this must not be used for interchange. So any application that uses this for interchange is non-conforming. And then, of course, we know that people still will be doing what they were just told not to do. But I think this is about the best thing we can do. So maybe that's also something we can discuss on the list, unless somebody has a strong knee-jerk reaction. Good.
Mike, you're on microphone. Are you still in? Did you have something to say here?
Oh, sorry. Let me mute myself.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, so I think we just discussed the content of this slide, so I don't have to repeat that. So the next question that came up was, do we have any information in those extension tags that must be understood, the elective versus critical issue? The text of the current draft is very clear. All tags are optional. Optional is a bad word because, of course, every tag is optional. You can always decide not to put it there. But what is meant here is that if the tag is there and you don't understand it or you don't want to do it, you ignore it. And the question was, should we include syntax to mark a certain tag critical? And we started discussing this, but for some, just seeing Pete's chat item, and I definitely agree. The question is, do we want to complete this discussion, or do we want to ignore the need for critical extensions? So last time we had these syntax proposals. So for instance, you could say that the information that a calendar on the Hebrew system is desirable, that would be a hint, and if you cannot do that, you just ignore it. Or you could say something like the calendar is critical, so if you cannot show it this way, don't show it at all, reject the date. And there was an alternative syntax proposed with the exclamation mark at the start, and that has the advantage that can be applied to the time zone hint as well, so that may be part of the solution to the issue we just previously discussed. But we need a syntax, and I don't want to design the syntax in this meeting, but I want to get people to reply to the issue or to send something to the mailing list. So anybody who thinks we should not be doing elective versus critical at all? Pete asks, what does reject mean? Well, not act on that. Which one?
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that I want to say about this proposal is that while it solves a lot of the problems that we just talked about, one of the goals that we had was to allow certain implementations that already follow part of this standard as sort of a de facto non-standard format would continue to keep working, but including this would make them also non-compliant, so they need to actually go back and change.
Yeah, we essentially have the choice to do this now or to do this later. And the damage doing this later will be larger than the damage doing this now.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't want to. I'm not against this proposal. Just pointing out one of the potential drawbacks.
Pete.
Yeah, this is Pete Resnick. I'm trying to get my head around what it means to reject the date. So in the previous discussion, we were talking about, well, you know, you might interpret the date to mean the numeric time zone. You might interpret the date, depending on what markers or what your defaults were, to be the textual time zone, and that the other piece was the hint. But I mean, if I'm running a calendar system and I get an event, and I support this extension, and I get an event that has a critical thing that I don't understand, what am I meant to do? Tell the user, I got this request for a meeting for you, but I don't know what time it is? Or when would I, what does reject mean
Treat as
practically?
malformed.
What's that?
Treat as malformed, the same way you would if it just had some random gibberish rather than an actual date in that field.
And so whatever I do with random gibberish, I should do to this. Okay. Yeah. It's an interesting implementation question.
Yeah, it gives you a really strong incentive never to send these things unless you really have to, because this prevents false interoperability. Ujjwal, you're still in the queue? Okay.
Cool. That seems to be everybody.
So I think that's another clear, let's take this to the list. Then we have a little problem. We don't really have a good name for the thing. And the draft currently calls it the Internet date time format, which is not really very sharply defined and also a little bit overpretentious. We could call it Extended RFC 3339, and I'm looking for proposals that are even worse. Informative timestamps.
Anyone?
Pete says extended is fine. And John wants not so random gibberish.
Nice. All right, we have about 10 minutes left in the session.
Yeah.
How are we going time-wise?
2 more slides.
Cool.
Okay, then the whole point of the draft right now is to define an extension format, plus one thing that doesn't fit that extension format, which is not necessarily an indication of having achieved the highest quality for this extension format. And I think to make this a practical proposal, we need to have at least one extension defined that people actually may want to use. Because if they look at this and decide, I don't really have an extension right now, why would they implement that? So my proposal would be to define something, and the one thing that maybe is most well understood at this point in time is giving a calendar hint based on the CA locale information, however that thing is called in the Unicode TR. And the advantage of actually doing something like this is that we would get to look at issues like, is the alphanumeric space we currently have for both labels and values the right thing? Probably want to stick with alphanumeric for the labels, but even that, there may be use cases where that's suboptimal. But we may or may not want to include further characters in the values. And the worst case, of course, is that we decide to actually include all of Unicode there, because there is a good reason to do that in an extension. So that's again one thing we have to define now. So we keep this extension point open for people to define something in there. And well, maybe we even can do something useful while we are providing this at least one extension with the document. So if you have other proposals, what we should define as an extension tag, this would be very interesting. So temporal needs calendars.
Cool. So Ujwal said, yeah, temporal needs calendars in the chat.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm very supportive of the proposal, and one of the other benefits for you, Carsten, is that I'd be more than happy to help out with this as much as you want.
Great. So could the note takers please note that Ujwal is writing a PR for number 4?
Yep, noted.
Good. And then we have the age-old editorial question. Do you write ABNF productions bottom-up, or do you write them top-down? And 3339 has chosen to write them bottom-up. So it starts with some random irrelevant syntactic detail, and then combines these things somehow before the actual production that defines the content of the draft is somewhere in the middle, and then there's another set of productions that follow for some reason. So I'm essentially asking for a license here to change the sequence, which doesn't have a semantic meaning, but may be used to people who read 3339, change the sequence to be top-down.
Anyone want to speak to that? I imagine it's fine, but if you have any objections, speak up.
Pete doesn't care. Great.
Yeah.
That's it. Then I'm done.
Excellent, thank you. So far we have, the final thing on my list was milestones. We have a milestone for August 2021 to adopt a draft, which is done, but I need area director to accept the milestone so I can click it as done. Sorry. Resolved as done. Actually, I can just do that, and then it'll go off to you to get approved anyway. And the other one is submit the draft to ISG for publication, which is obviously not going to happen in December 2021. We're waiting for the ISO Liaison, which should come through next week. It sounds like the one big piece of debate we still have is how we're going to indicate the what is more important out of the offset or the time zone name. Is there anything else that we think is going to block us, and what kind of timeline are we thinking here? I guess, Carsten, you're probably best placed to guess where we should put this milestone.
Yeah, it can't really take that long. I don't think we will open up a new construction site here, except for the ones that are already on the slide. But of course, the details of conflicting hints and elective versus critical will probably take another couple of months to clarify. And it helps if people actually follow the GitHub and our mailing list discussions and comment there. So we had a little bit of a break in the discussion and have been speeding up again. And I think we don't really need another break to finish this.
All right, so hopefully we can finish. I've put June 2022 as a potential date for this. Do you think we're going to need another interim meeting to get there, or will mailing list discussion be sufficient? Ujwal?
I think mailing list should be sufficient. Glad that we're down to a single open discussion item. Also, since this is this is the one that took the longest for Temple to wrap their head around, I'm glad that out of all of them, it's this one. But yeah, my feeling is that this could be easily resolved in the mailing list. Person, do you disagree with that?
It could. I don't agree with that.
All
I
right.
think it's good to have milestones. So having an interim meeting, maybe end of May, would be a good thing.
All right, we'll pencil in interim meeting if we need it. That, I think, is everything we have. Anyone have any other business in our remaining 4 minutes? All right, thank you, everybody. We made it. We got through. See you on the mailing list, and possibly in May. Thanks, Carsten.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ujwal. Thanks, everyone else who attended. If you're in the room and you have not yet added yourself to the Meet Echo for this session, please do, so that you show up in the blue sheets and they don't give us an even smaller room next time. All right, thanks, everyone. Yeah?
I'm still very slightly confused by the blue sheet saying, because it never worked on my mobile, so I just go into the Meet Echo video thing on my laptop.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Because it never says like.
If you show up at all, you'll be in the list. Thanks.
It doesn't say you are now on the blue sheet.
Yeah, I was, but then I ran out. All right, you're still on video, Carsten. Do you want me to kick you off, or are you hanging around watching the room?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. And here too. I get double view. You've turned off
Yeah,
your
but I
sound now,
think-
so we can't hear you.
I think I'll switch to together now. Bye-bye.
All right. Cool. Thank you. JMAP JMAP and Extra is next in half an hour. Yes. All right. When you're that far away from someone, I guess I'm talking to the microphone. I forgot to suggest to the Secretariat that we need a manual mute button on this microphone so that we can turn it off, particularly for feedback.